Hey guys, it's Carolyn, and welcome back to the podcast. I'm very excited about today's guest to talk about some topics we haven't discussed before. Today we have Rick Bracken. He's an engaging keynote speaker and executive coach known for his dynamic storytelling and entertaining styles. He seamlessly blends data, research, and emotion to deliver powerful insights and inspire sustainable, positive change. Good morning, Rich. How are you?
Oh, fantastic. How are you?
Oh, not too bad for a Monday, Just killing it. All right. So before we dive in, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got to where you are now.
Sure. So I'm an executives coach and keynote speaker based in Kansas City and come from a variety of background, mostly corporate, but then also in the last decade and change, I've been in the legal world, working as a business development manager and director, and then also a client services director for law firms. For the last 3 years, I've moved out of that realm, have been consulting into law firms and into corporate entities, so GCs, legal operations, and working with small and large law firms as well, coaching on emotional intelligence and executive presence, two of the topics that are desperately needed in this industry. And in the intro, that the description that you read about data and research and everything else, I'm literally that cartoon character that just likes data. So I'm a little bit of a blend of both. It's kind of a dual personality. But being able to take the data about emotional intelligence, specifically in our world, in the legal world, but then also in the corporate world as well, and how I can help people get better every single day.
So what do you mean? What is emotional intelligence?
So emotional intelligence, it's a term that's been thrown around a little bit lately, but it's been around since the mid 90s. And what it boils down to is the idea that we are in control or understand our emotions and are in control of them. So our self-awareness and our self-management, which is the self-acumen side of things. But then when we move into the social acumen side, which is social awareness and relationship management, it really boils down to how are we identifying and managing our emotions? But then how are we engaging other people, recognizing their emotions, managing their emotions, everything from empathy to resilience? And how are we developing and enhancing the relationships that we have, both personally and professionally?
So let me ask you a question, because the first thing that popped into my mind is like, okay, we're at work to work and there shouldn't be like emotions. So
Mhm.
why is this important in the in business in the workplace?
Sure. The only thing that should not have emotions in the workplace is AI because it's a robot. Robots don't feel things. I mean, unless there's a robot listening now that got offended by that, then we'll talk about that in another episode. But those that say that emotions shouldn't come into work are the ones that are needing emotional intelligence the most, because everybody deals with emotions on a day-to-day basis, whether they're what I call the primary colors of emotions: happy, sad, angry, frustrated, stressed. Or we're diving deeper into more developed relationships or developed emotions that we have with our relationships and understanding what those are. But if we're not acknowledging and managing those emotions, both with ourselves and with others, we're missing a gigantic opportunity for relationship build and team building and communication. And that's part of the reason that I actually got into emotional intelligence, because I wasn't managing my own. I was stressed out. I was burnt out. I drove myself to the emergency room one day from my law firm because I wasn't managing my own emotions. I wasn't managing what was going on in my world. And I definitely wasn't managing the inflow of emotions that were coming my way. So I'm living proof that by not managing your emotions, things could end pretty badly. Now, thankfully, I wound up in the ER with a doctor that was studying emotional intelligence, and he taught me all about it, told me about this book that I started reading. And so now I've come the full circle that not only am I an emotional intelligence expert and talk about it all the time and tell organizations why it's important, but I'm also the brand ambassador for the company that wrote the book that I started off studying. But when we talk about dynamics in work, when we think about just ourselves, 60% of our performance as an individual has to do with our emotional intelligence. So you can be a very smart person and have all the knowledge and all the acumen all day long. But if you don't have the ability to manage your emotions or talk with people effectively or listen effectively, you're literally cutting more than half of your ability to succeed off.
That's pretty amazing. So like, where do you start for like someone like me? I've kind of heard about it, never really dove into it. Like, so you decide that this is something that you realize is important. How
Mhm.
do you start? I don't even know where to start. Where would you start?
Sure. Yeah. So where I started, where I recommend everybody starts, is that the emotional intelligence company that I work with, Talent Smart EQ, we have an assessment that tells you what your emotional intelligence is on a scale from 1 to 100. The nice thing is that it breaks it down by the areas. So self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and relationship management. It breaks down where your strengths and weaknesses are. But not only does it break those down, but also gives you tips on how you can increase and enhance your emotional intelligence where you are maybe weak. Now, I think it was around like a 75 maybe when I first took the test, when I first got into it. And now I'm in the low 90s because, frankly, I have an 8 and a 12-year-old son. So my emotional intelligence is being tested every single day. But also it is really important to understand that we can enhance it. When your IQ taps out, I think it's at 17, our IQ is peaked. It's not going to change. You cannot increase it. Now you can learn things, but your true IQ is stuck when it hits 17. Your emotional intelligence, you can raise or lower at any given point in your lifetime. So the control that you have over that is actually more dynamic. So starting with understanding where you start or where you stand as far as your emotional intelligence score is, that's the first step that I would recommend. And then second, I understand that we go through our days, especially nowadays when we are more on, we're more communicated than ever. We're more reachable than ever. We are literally getting through day by day by day, back-to-back meetings and back-to-back appointments and back-to-back responsibilities and projects. So there's always something going on. And we don't take the time to stop and say, hey, wait, how am I doing? Like, what's going on in my world? What's working? What's not working? So taking time every single day to just check in with yourself. I recommend that's the easiest thing to do. Start 5 minutes in the morning. How am I doing? How's the day going to go? How am I feeling? Stop at lunch. Take 5 minutes to check back in with yourself because between morning and noon, something's going to happen. And so if you say, hey, I'm in a great mood first thing in the morning, but man, I want to literally just go after everybody at lunch. What happened in between there? And you can identify the thing that triggered you, what the emotion was, and then what are you going to do differently? Because chances are, if we reacted in a bad way, that's not our best selves. So how can we react better next time? How can we take more control over our emotions next time? But if you don't stop and realize that when it's happening, we just get into a day where like, well, I'll deal with that later. I've got another appointment to get to. I've got another meeting to get to. I'll manage that later. Or worse, like I was doing, I'll just push it down and not deal with it at all. And if I ever have time to deal with it, I'll get to it. So if you start in the morning, do it 5 minutes in the morning, 5 minutes at lunch, 5 minutes at the end of the day. So whether end of your work day or end of your just physical day, but just check in. What worked? What didn't work? How am I at my best self? Am I at my best self? And then what can I do differently to improve tomorrow?
So say you start out the day good, you get to lunch and you're angry and frustrated.
Mm-hmm.
You're not sure exactly why, but you're just pissed off.
Right.
What do you do and how do you work on that, I guess?
So I'll give you a great example. So personally, I had a guy that I had a meeting with every Thursday at 11 o'clock. I will remember that until the day that I die, because this gentleman was the worst, most passive aggressive, condescending individual that I've ever come in contact with. And that's saying a lot because I've dealt with a lot of people like that. But I didn't realize that every day or every week that I had that meeting, because it was a weekly recurring meeting, starting Wednesday at lunch, because I would look at my calendar for the next 24 hours. What do I need to prepare for? Wednesday at lunch, I would start getting stressed out because I saw that meeting on my calendar the next day. So from Wednesday at noon until at least Thursday at noon, if not Thursday at midnight, by the time I've had a couple glasses of wine to drown out the pain that this guy put me through, I was stressed out for at least 36 hours. And I mean, that wasn't fair to me. This guy was taking up my mental real estate, and he could give two damns about what I was doing or how I felt. But here I was drowning in my own stress about it. So once I started doing that 5-minute exercise and realizing, well, why am I so stressed out right now? Oh, it's because of this meeting. This meeting is pissing me off and making me frustrated and making me feel less than every single week. So what can I do differently? This guy liked catching me in a moment where I didn't know the answer to something. He liked shooting down everything that I had to say. So I decided, number one, I was going to go in with a positive, confident mentality, because I would go into that meeting with my head down, with my shoulders forward, stressed. Yeah, exactly. Stressed out and ready for battle, but also ready to take it on the chin. And so I was going in defeated before I even walked in the door. So going in a more positive, confident frame of mind. And then I would literally go in with things that he didn't realize I was working on for him. So it was, I knew who his clients were. So I would go do some research in the news on his clients, or I would go find out something or follow their LinkedIn page. And I would walk in and be like, hey man, how are you? So great to see you. And oh, by the way, before we get going in the meeting, I just want to share with you, your client had this happen the other day. You may want to reach out to your GC and just say congratulations. Or they had this pop up in the news the other day with a competitor. You may want to reach out and see if there's an opportunity to help them with this project. And it would almost be like kill him with kindness in a way. Right. He would be so caught off guard that he didn't know what to do. And I was in here bringing him positivity and bringing him business and bringing him reasons to reach out to his client. So I caught him on his heels as opposed to him getting me on mine.
Gotcha. All right. So give me some of the data of how important this is in like the business work environment.
Sure, absolutely. So I touched on one a minute ago, the 60% of your performance is based on your emotional intelligence. There's things like 70% of an employee's point of view of an organization is based on its leader's emotional intelligence. So think about that also. Right, exactly.
Like,
Whether that's good or bad, it could be really good or really
not
bad.
paying attention is not a good thing.
100%. If people aren't willingly coming in for interviews, there may be a problem. But it really has an impact on the productivity of your organization. It has a lot to do with whether or not people are recommending your company to their friends or to trusted colleagues that they would want to recruit. And then also it becomes a retention problem, because if you don't have a good emotional intelligence as a leader, you're going to leave. I had a company one time that I worked for that I was I think it was about a year and a half, 2 year span. I was the 32nd person on a team of 25 to resign. So the emotional intelligence or lack thereof of a leader of a team doesn't even have to be a CEO or a C-suite. It could be somebody that is a director or a middle manager or some sort of level of leadership. If they're having a negative impact on their team or a negative impact on the workflow, people are going to leave. If they don't feel respected, heard, seen, if they don't feel listened to, they're going to wind up leaving because of that lack of emotional intelligence. But also when organizations focus on the idea that emotional intelligence is important, because a lot of organizations are still warming to the idea, right? They're still trying to figure out like, I need to go dump $50 million into AI. Why should I pay attention to emotional intelligence at all? Which that's another episode too. AI is important, but without emotional intelligence, it's worthless. But understanding that companies that focus on emotional intelligence as a priority, and you're talking about raising the leadership acumen, raising teamwork, raising collaboration and innovation, problem solving, people bringing new ideas to the table. All of that comes with high emotional intelligence. Those companies perform at a 22 times higher level than their competitors, because most organizations are not paying attention to that kind of element of their performance or culture. And so if you are investing in emotional intelligence and you're raising the leadership of your emotional intelligence of your organization, that is going to open the floodgates to positive progress and change and growth.
So tell me what an emotionally intelligent boss would look like.
They would look like us. But
I'll probably
from a performance standpoint, these are leaders that are going to ask deeper questions. They're going to be the ones that if somebody comes to them with a problem, they're going to say, I'm sorry, maybe there's a frustration. I'm sorry that that's going on. Tell me more about how we got to this point. They're not just going to take a frustration or a failure at face value. They're going to ask deeper questions. They're going to open up opportunities for people to be psychologically safe enough to share ideas within the organization. I had a boss one time that I had a great idea for something that I had run to the wall to figure out where the opportunity was, but also where maybe some of the blind spots were. And I knew with absolute confidence that this could have been done and done well. And I knew how to get it done. But when I went to her with the idea, she said, absolutely not. This is ridiculous. And it didn't even hear the business case of it. No, we're not doing this at all. Now, I did it anyway, and I got in a lot of trouble for it, but it wound up being highly successful. But I didn't have the psychological safety from that point forward to take any more ideas to her, nor did I have the desire. But when we have those opportunities to engage our teams, ask questions, get feedback, open up like one of my favorite things that I recommend companies do is spend some time once a month at minimum. Spend 1 hour. Well, all you do is get in a room with a whiteboard, because I'm a whiteboard nerd. But if you get a whiteboard up on the wall and just throw ideas up there, doesn't matter how ridiculous or big or small they are, just start throwing ideas up there and then just sit and talk about them. Start running some of them to the wall, get some interest in some of them, figure out what the plan is. And then for organizations that do that, and I'm actually working on a book on this idea of being playful and innovation, but those individuals and those organizations that encourage that kind of conversation wind up having ideas that become big opportunities or big differentiators in the marketplace. And you could take those small ideas, put them in small test cases where they're not going to break the company or put you in a bad light and from a PR standpoint, but do a small test case. But the idea that you're giving your teams and your organizations and maybe people that you're leading or managing, they're giving them the opportunity to succeed and try and fail, frankly, and giving them the psychological safety to do so, they're going to keep bringing you those ideas. And that's how your company grows and thrives.
That's interesting. So going for somebody who has like a 0 on the emotional intelligence to something like that, how do you start? Just like once a month, throwing up like questions with an issue to the whole team?
Yeah, one of the most terrifying things, and I love, and I'm going to be curious to see if I'm 100% on this. When I talk about the idea of just asking for feedback and not being able to say anything but thank you, because number one, when we ask, see, there it is, 100%. I got it. Thank you very much. That was not scripted, by the way. But the idea of asking for feedback. Number one, it is the most terrifying thing to do as an individual, but it is also terrifying for the person that you're asking, because they may not have the most favorable things to say. But I always call it like the spinach and the tea syndrome. Like if you're willing to tell somebody, hey, you got a little something here, it's scary to point that out to them because it may embarrass them, but also you're looking out for their best interest.
Absolutely.
And so it's a matter of saying like, okay, what can I do to ask my team, or where can I give that psychological safety to say, look, I'm trying to get better as a leader. I'm trying to improve my communication skills. I'm trying to improve my openness to innovation and change. Can you give me some feedback on how you perceive my ability to do that? Give them the area, give them the space and the ability to say so, and then say, look, I appreciate that. Thank you. You can't contest it. You can't challenge it. You can't excuse it. If they give you some negative feedback or neutral feedback, you can't make any excuses for it whatsoever. You have to say thank you. And it will be terrifying the first couple of times. I've tried it. It's nerve-wracking. I actually feel my heart beating right now thinking about it. But it is a great way to do that. But also just opening up the idea that there's emotion in business. Most people, and I just had a conversation with a friend of mine who was speaking at an AI conference. And we talked about this idea that the further companies go into AI or go into machine learning or go into some sort of a technological change or digital transformation, the further you go into that, you have to be mindful of the empathetic emotional intelligence element of your business. Because the more you replace people or try to replace people with technology, take those people and put them in a position where they can serve your clients as best possible with empathy and with emotional intelligence. Because those organizations that are just so hell-bent on being technologically sound are missing the opportunity to blend the two. And that's where they're really going to succeed.
So does, like, as a boss working on emotional intelligence, does it do better in a group setting, one-on-one? What would you suggest?
It depends on the individual. I will say for those that are less emotionally intelligent, they're less resilient. Going back to the data point, when I was starting to study emotional intelligence in the legal space specifically, I looked up what are the most, most highly emotional intelligent organizations and roles, but what are the least? And no surprise, because they're type A perfectionists, attorneys have the second lowest emotional intelligence of any industry, only to doctors. Because nobody goes to medical school and nobody goes to law school to kind of be good at what they do, kind of come close to a solution. You come out of law school or you come out of med school wanting to be as perfect as possible. So understanding that that's part of the job and part of what you're supposed to be doing, but bringing along the emotional intelligence area of how you can practice or how you can engage clients is critical to what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. But it's understanding that if you're in an individual situation, you have more psychological safety to share. Now, those that are low in emotional intelligence are not going to walk into some group setting like it's a counseling group setting and start opening up the floodgates to what's going on, or is talking about their personal struggles, or talking about how they feel incompetent or they battle imposter syndrome at work. So I do one-on-one coaching all the time with executives and attorneys on this topic specifically. But then as they get more comfortable to bring in a team setting, it's powerful. And once you start teaching people what emotional intelligence is, how you can raise it, and why it's important, people go in together because they then realize that they're not alone. But that first step is usually done easier and more confidently in a one-to-one setting.
Gotcha. Good deal. Okay, so what is executive presence?
So executive presence is our gravitas. It's how we approach the market. It's how we approach a room. It's how we're perceived by our colleagues, our peers, our clients. And really, it's that feeling that when somebody walks in a room and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm glad they're here. They have high executive presence. They have a very good acumen within the room. They have a very great gravitas in the room. But those people that walk in, you're like, oh my God, not this person. Kind of like the guy I mentioned earlier, right? But understanding that executive presence is made up of things like persuasion, emotional intelligence, public speaking, your presence, your body language, even on Zoom. I talk with executives all the time that are trying to get better at executive presence. And they're like, well, I'm fine in a boardroom. I can get up and deliver my content. But when I get on Zoom, I get really self-conscious. We work on those kinds of things. And it's self-belief, because so many of us, and I think the statistic there is that 80% of our thoughts on a daily basis, around 80,000 thoughts a day for each individual, 80% of those are either negative or neutral, and they're repetitive. And so when we're thinking about negative self-talk, imposter syndrome, those kinds of things that are keeping us at bay with our talent and our success because we're talking negatively to ourselves that often every single day, understanding that self-belief is what drives everything. The ability to become more emotionally intelligent instead of saying, well, that's just who I am. That's how I am. That's how I'm wired. No, it's not. You aren't always this way. If you got to a point where you're low in emotional intelligence, something happened along the way, or you were conditioned or trained to get to that point. You can change that. So understanding that your self-belief to walk out of any situation that you're in, to improve anything that you're doing, or go after any goal that you want to. That is the number one thing that I challenge people to do, is say, why not? Why couldn't you do this? Why shouldn't you be the one delivering the keynote? Why shouldn't you be the one on TV? Why shouldn't you be the one getting the promotion or moving up in the organization? Why shouldn't you be doing those things? That self-belief, even if it's a split-second decision, that crossroads of should I believe myself or not, choosing the path of positivity changes the game for everyone.
And I've heard that over and over. But as someone who has got 80% of what you think, how do you change that?
It's all in the process. It's all in saying, okay, look, I got to this point by consistent behavior. So if I'm going to change anything, that's the path that I need to go. It's going to be consistent. It's going to be small things that you change every single day. I compare it to weight loss. I went through a 100-pound weight loss journey myself. And it wasn't that I went out and lost 100 pounds that next day. It was the small changes that I made. It was the diet change that I made, the exercise change, and it was the consistency every single day. Also understanding that there were days where I'm a fan of cheese and red wine, so I'm not really going to be all that fantastic on the journey. I have to give myself grace. I love bread. I love chips and salsa. Like, I'm going to fall off the wagon at some point. But understanding that when you make those mistakes, that you can always fix them, or you can always do things in moderation and come back stronger the next day. But you have to give yourself grace on that. So as we think about how do we recondition those thoughts, it's just that consistency of saying yes to this instead of no, I can't. Or, I shouldn't do that. I talked this morning on the news about getting out of your comfort zone. Understanding that you could do something if you really chose to do it, and understanding you're not going to be perfect the first time out. So many of us don't do things, or we don't pursue these types of goals because we don't want to look silly. We don't want to look like we don't know something. We don't want to make a mistake. We don't want to be judged. But understanding that you're going to make progress by starting. You've got to get out of your own way. You've got to be graceful with yourself. You've got to understand that, yeah, I may have conditioned myself over the course of 30 years of negative talk or lack of self-belief, but I can fix that if I start the small details every single day. Positive affirmation, surrounding yourself with positive people, choosing the positive route on that fork in the road of decision making. It sounds silly, but that reconditioning will work over time.
That's a lot. So you want what are you shooting for? What do you want your executive presence to be?
You want your executive presence to be at a level that when you talk or when you're engaging people, that they just believe you without as a hesitation. The fact that they trust in you, not that you're misleading them by any means whatsoever, because that's not obviously part of executive presence. But the idea that when you speak or when you lead a team, that they're like, yeah, absolutely. I think we've all either met or heard of or worked with someone that, like, I'd do anything for them. I trust in their belief. The people that walk into the room and you feel immediately relaxed because you know they're going to do or say something that's going to make sense. Even in the situations where they maybe fall short, they still have that gravitas. They still have the consistency of behavior. It's not like a one-off, they had a great idea once and then the rest of the time that they're just god awful. They're consistently positive. They're consistently encouraging. They're consistently getting to a point where they're growing the people around them. Leaders are meant to grow other leaders. If you just keep your team at bay for the rest of their career, unless they choose that they just don't want to be a leader and they want to stay in that role, your job as a leader is to grow those individuals around you. So the executive presence that you have as a leader will help others become better leaders around you. And at the same time, when I coach people on executive presence with public speaking, it's understanding that your message is all about confidence. I talk to people all the time that are like subject matter experts on a topic, and they don't want to get up and talk about something because they're like, I'm afraid somebody's going to judge me. I'm like, you are literally the only person that can deliver this content from this perspective. How can they judge anything that you say? Well, I'm afraid I'm going to look silly, or I'm afraid I'm going to stutter or use too many ums or likes. Okay, we can work on those things. Yeah. But it's understanding that you have to want to work on it and then you have to get better at it, but understanding that it's going to take time and practice to get better.
Absolutely. So what does coaching with you look like? How, like, get somebody like me that's kind of heard of it, but wants to improve on what does that look like?
So I have different arrangements with different clients based on what they need. So I've got some clients that I do in short sprints. So I've got the client that I talked about this morning that's doing a keynote on AI. We're working in a short sprint. So I'll do something where it's a one-off project. She's working on a keynote. She wants to nail this keynote. I'll work with her on the delivery, the conceptualization, the slides, some of the different interactive experiential elements. So they're the short sprints that I work with people on, that they just need, they don't need an overhaul of things. They just need some really dedicated third-party thoughts on something. But then I've got other clients that are longer term. I've got some clients that are on year retainers where they say, I want to work on this and I know it's going to take time, but let's work together. And it's usually 2 to 3 times a month based on their schedule. Make sure that we get into the things that we need to get into, but also leave room that things are going to happen in their roles or their lives that are going to pop up. So we could sit there and map out the entire year, but they may wind up having somebody on their team get fired, or they have to move into a new position, or something changes along the way. We have the flexibility within that time. We have an hour, hour give and take, depending on what's going on, but an hour at minimum that we talk about the things that we're planning on talking about, but also leaving 10, 15 minutes on the front end to say, what's going on, what's front of mind? Because I've had clients that'll come in that we're supposed to work on topic A, but something else has come up and they're completely distracted during that conversation because they're thinking about that other thing. So we get those things out on the front end of the conversation. But whether it's short-term, long-term, I love working with people. My calling is to help people and I love it. And so that's why I love doing what I do.
All right. Tell me about your favorite client success story.
The most recent one, I've got a bunch of them, thank goodness, because I've got some great clients. The most recent one, I have a client that wanted to work on her executive presence. She wanted to level up in her company. She wanted to move up promotion-wise, even if it was within the company or a different role. And one of the things that she was very nervous about was public speaking. And so I kind of I get very close with my client. We develop a great rapport and a great relationship. So I build a lot of trust with them on the front end. And so I kind of along the ways kept nudging her okay, well, what opportunities are popping up? And I could tell that she knew I was nudging her, but I wasn't doing it in an overly aggressive way. And I said, I want you to find some opportunities. Let's just talk about them. Find some opportunities that you can raise your hand and say, I'd love to speak at this meeting or speak at this conference or speak at this event. And so finally she found one and she was like, she goes, I almost regret telling you this, but there's an event coming up that I'm thinking about raising my hand. I went, well, we're not thinking about it anymore. We're going to do it. So she raised her hand. We talked about the content. It was 15 minutes at an event. So not very long, but a good first step into launching into this. And so bless her heart. And I'm sure she wouldn't mind me telling the story, but so she's set up for success. We went through her slides. I worked with her on redesigning the slides to make it a little more, palatable. Talked about how she should open her presentation, how she should engage the audience. What does the audience need to hear at that point? And so we walked through all of those things. And then the night before her presentation, she sends me a text message. She goes, can you talk? I'm freaking out. And I love being there for my clients. If, it was 8:00 at night, I was like, yeah, absolutely. Give me 15 minutes. I'll give you a call. So I called her and I said, what's going on? She goes, okay, remember how I told you that I thought this was going to be a presentation for 75 people? I said, yeah. She goes, well, I just found out that there's going to be over 400 people in the room when I present this.
Oh, shit.
Right. And I said, okay. And I just kind of shrugged it off. She goes, what do you mean just okay? I went, okay. Did your slides change? Well, no. Did your talking points change? No. The things we talked about from the setup and the delivery and the different elements of emotional connection to the audience, did that change at all? Are you going to do it differently because there's more people? She said, no. I said, okay. Now, logistically, have you seen the room? She said, yeah. And I said, okay, stage, probably a bunch of lights, super bright. I said, yeah. And I went, okay. Chances are you're not going to see more than 75 people at any given time because those lights are so bright. So it doesn't matter if there's 75 or 475 in the room. You're going to see the first couple rows. You can't see anything else because the lights are so bright. I said, but at the end of the day, The only thing that's changed is the number of people. Your confidence hasn't changed. Your knowledge hasn't changed. Your slides, your talking points, all that stuff is the same. It's just to more people. I said, so I want you to take a deep breath before you go to bed tonight, visualize what that's going to look like success-wise. And then the next morning, do the same thing, get up, visualize what success looks like. And then right before you go on stage, take another deep breath. Go through that mental exercise one more time. And then I want you to walk out there. I want you to smile at the audience, and I want you to deliver the content like we've practiced. So she does, and I get a text message about an hour later, and she is sending me screenshots upon screenshots of text messages, emails, different comments that people had made on how well her presentation went, about how it was different than everybody else's, how she delivered, people, it was one of the comments was that it was the only part of the entire presentation, because there were multiple speakers, the only time in the entire presentation that nobody was looking at their phones. Everybody was looking up, everybody was engaged, they were smiling, they were enjoying what you're saying. She was delivering an update from the legal department to her company about the use of AI. You could not, give me some sexy topics. That's not really one of them. So the fact that she delivered it with such confidence and such rapport with the audience in a way that we crafted together was everything. And she sent me a picture of her standing at the podium that somebody had taken, and she was beaming with confidence. And so that's why I do what I do. I want to find the success for that individual every time I engage someone and figure out how I can get them to their optimal level of subjective happiness and success, and figure out the best way to get there with them. That brings me so much joy. I'm getting all not choked up, but I'm feeling very warm and fuzzy. Thank God Hallmark is based here in Kansas City, because I could go write some cards for them right now.
Exactly. Yeah. That's an amazing story. So if people want to find out more about you or your coaching and your speaking, where would they go?
Yeah, everything you can find out about me is richbracken.com. So my LinkedIn is on there, YouTube, all the information about my keynotes, my coaching. You'll find that I also wear many hats. Thank God I have a gigantic head. So I'm the keynote speaking. I do the executive coaching. I also do MC event hosting. And then I was a national touring DJ for 25 years. So I've got that on the website as well. Don't be shocked if you find a video of me delivering a keynote in a disco ball jacket, kind of on brand for me. But I love having fun. I love what I call edutainment, where I'm educating people, but also having a good time in the process. So lots of good stuff at richbracken.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.